Item number 12 is been referred to us by the Audit and Risk Committee, and it's the regular health, safety and wellbeing update. Quite interesting that this should come after the previous item. I'll just double check. We've got Andre Lube on the line with us, the head of our head of Employment Relations and Health, Safety and Wellbeing. Andre, are you with us?
Kia ora, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I am.
Thanks, Andre. Look, I'll ask for somebody to move and to second this. It's been moved by the Deputy Mayor and seconded by Councillor Henderson. And if I can get you to outline this, Andre, people have read the report, but anything you want to highlight, it is a noting report, and the report will be provided, or has been provided actually, to local boards. Andre.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kia ora koutou, everyone. There are just a few items on the report that I wanted to sort of talk to. As you will see from the report, that it's sort of divided into two main components. The first being the organisation's response from a health and safety perspective to the COVID-19 situation, and the second being a more general focus on, for lack of a better term, a business as usual health and safety matters. With regard to the first, the COVID-19 response, I think we're all obviously very relieved to be at a level, an alert level that gives us a bit more freedom and an ability to move around. There are some lessons that we've taken from both lockdowns that we're translating and we're looking to incorporate into business as usual within council, but also in the event that we were to move up alert levels. The first relates to the support for employees working from home and ensuring that we're able to provide them with appropriate support to enable to do so safely and in a way that ensures that productivity isn't affected as well. And I'll touch on a couple of points in a moment. The other piece that I think we're also done a lot of work on now is in relation to track and tracing, and we're put a lot of effort into that. I'm pleased to be able to say that certainly over the last lockdown, we had no situation of any staff member within Auckland Council who was who tested positive. We have had a number of people, however, who have obviously gone through the testing process, and we've worked hard to ensure that they are supported through that process. A key sort of part of our response, and perhaps an area that has many large and small employers sort of looking very closely at, is that of wellbeing, and we again put a lot of effort into our existing wellbeing resources, and those are identified in the report, but also I suppose recognising that this is a changing environment in a number of respects, and we've sort of worked hard to look further at what more can be done in the wellbeing space, and that's something that we will be putting more resource and effort into over the months ahead. With regard to the sort of business as usual element, I've referenced 5 serious incidents that occurred over the last few months since the last report, and also some of the lessons learned that we've taken from them and the status of those incidents. Certainly a key feature for us, and it's sort of picking up on some of the conversation in the previous item, has been the importance of learning from such incidents to ensure that we are able to put in place appropriate controls and measures. And I use incident number 1 as a case in point, which is something that's just very recently been identified in the United States of people swimming in swimming pools that are potentially quite shallow, but because of the way in which people tend to breathe when they come out of swimming underwater. This condition known as shallow water blackout is something that's being increasingly looked at across the recreation world as something that needs to be taken account of. The Safe 365 process is again our more broader organisational assessment process of our organisational maturity in the health and safety space, and is a key measure that we use and a key mechanism for ensuring that as an organisation we both have a good sense of learning from lag indicators, but we also look ahead in terms of where we need to focus our efforts. The final point I just wanted to point to was in terms of the risk management system and incident management system that we use to record incidents and including near misses. And that's something that is under review at the moment. We've sort of identified that there probably hasn't been the level of usage of the system for several reasons, but the sort of usage that we would expect of our people, and that's been something that we've put considerable focus on over the last month in particular. And there were some slightly concerning, or extremely concerning statistics that form part of the data that's on the dashboard attached to this report that we've looked to address, and I'm pleased to say that we're getting some good traction. For example, closing out open incidents in Risk Manager. We, over the course of a week push, we managed to reduce that by close to 60% of open incidents. So that's a very high-level overview of the report, and I'm very happy to take questions or to explain anything further.
Thank you very much, Andre. That's a very full account, and people have had the chance to read the paper. So I'll run questions and comments together on this. Probably we can get through the item relatively quickly, but we'll start with Deputy Mayor and Chair and Deputy Chair of Audit and Risk. Have I got that right? No, just Deputy Mayor and on Audit and Risk. Okay, Bill Cashmore.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think Daniel Newman's the Deputy Chair.
Sorry,
Daniel
you're
Newman's
absolutely right.
Yeah. So thanks, Andre. Thank you for the report. I'd note, Mr. Mayor, that the Audit and Risk Committee was always concerned about council staff, senior management and elected members and their responsibilities around health and safety for our employees. And that's one of always the key questions they ask. Andre, my specific question is, with COVID's brought a unique experience where a lot of people are working from home, and we have had slips, falls and accidents reported from our employees working from home. How do we go about remedying those accident sites when we have no real control over them? It's other people's private property.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. We have put a lot of, I suppose there's two main channels to our how we support our staff in that regard. One is there is a lot of guidance for employees directly available on Katahi, which is the intranet site, around the sort of things that they need to think about when setting up a workstation at home. We also make it and we again put a lot of resource into providing guidance to people leaders to ensure that it is part of a conversation that they have with their team members and follow up with their team members to ensure that people aren't working in situations where their health or safety might be compromised.
Thanks, Andre. And do we allow our staff to have sufficient materials and assets such as laptops or laptop holders that they could use in their own home place?
There is something of a balancing exercise to be done there. Certainly with things like laptops, we encourage staff to take those home. We're just working on a policy at the moment regarding additional equipment that might be needed as part of that process. So, and that's going to, there are some disciplines that obviously we need to put in place around providing things like screens or desks or special chairs. And in that situation, we would be looking for some sort of guidance from occupational therapists or ergonomic experts to support providing that additional equipment.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Happy to move this item.
Thank you. And the next question is from Richard Hills. Question and comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Goff. And yeah, just a question, and I know I often ask about it, but and we have really ramped up the work in the last 3 years around mental health. But how are we, you know, considering we have less, you all have less budgets, but how are we ensuring that mental health and the well-being of our staff is being more looked after, especially with people, you know, not seeing people face to face and maybe not being able to pick up, you know, certain behaviours, and, you know, just sending an email saying I'm okay, maybe not the best way. How are we ensuring that we're doing all we can? And, you know, there has been a few issues. I know in my community, one popular staff member took their own life not long ago, and it was very hard on the team. But with COVID and all the other stresses, I just want to ensure that we're actually able to ramp up that work. Or is there a discussion we need to have with elected members around how we can increase budgets to ensure that there is, you know, ability for people to be looked after while jobs are being lost and while teams are being restructured, as well as everything else that's going on?
Thank you, Councillor. Look, I think it's fair to say that there are a number of channels to the wellbeing question, and it's been something that we have put a lot of thought and effort into trying to ensure that there is sufficient support for everyone. It is certainly something that, from a central health and safety perspective, we've really pushed hard with our people leaders to be mindful about, and recognising, for example, that particularly in some situations where people are not necessarily able to work as productively as possible, or have to work around childcare commitments or a house environment where it may not be conducive to focused work, that those are the sort of situations that need to be taken account of. One sort of measure, I suppose, that we've got, and it's touched on in the report, is that we did a survey around wellbeing in the middle of the year, and there was an 85% positive response from the participants in the survey around Council's support in the wellbeing space. And we're going to implement, in the process of sort of finalising, a regular wellbeing pulse check with our people. But as I sort of mentioned right at the start, this is certainly something that it's an evolving landscape, and we're doing what we can to stay ahead of the curve.
Thank you. And just another thing on sick pay. How many days are our staff eligible for, and have we extended that at all when we are considering a very low tolerance to illness at the moment? So if you are unwell at all, you know, we're asking people to to stay home, obviously for good reasons to protect others. But what if there's financial pressure and other pressure to get work done? How are we balancing that across the Auckland Council family?
Thank you, Councillor. So the staff, as a generalisation, receive 10 days sick leave per annum, and that's that accumulates without any ceiling. A number of employers do put a ceiling on that accumulation process of 25 days. We don't. So some staff have some fairly comfortable balances underneath them. That said, we also have provision for leave, discretionary leave, where people don't have a sick leave balance available to them. And we've been worked hard to ensure that in situations staff aren't disadvantaged where, for example, they're waiting for the results of tests and are having to isolate themselves. So in those situations, people have been paid, and to the best of my knowledge, no one has gone without income over that period, or in those circumstances, I should say. I think I've covered off your points, but if I've missed something, I'm certainly happy to come back to that.
No, that's really good, and it's given me more confidence. Thank you.
Thank you. And final question, Councillor Chris Darby.
Sorry, I might have just missed this, but can I just have some clarification? Our people working at home, one of the things I very quickly became aware of probably about a month ago was when I read my heating bill, and my heating bill was related to me being at home. And I immediately thought of our staff, and I thought the staff that are working remotely that would probably not have been paying a similar heating bill because they would have been in their workplace. And I thought also of their data plan, and that maybe they were blowing out their cap and having to pay extra. So has there been some thinking about the situation of our staff in terms of, paying for home utilities over and above what they'd normally be paying to continue to do their work?
That might be best answered by Phil Wilson. I think it's slightly out of the health and safety, but Phil, have you got an answer to that? It's a good question.
I can pick it up to some extent, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, you can have the first shot, Andre, and then we'll pass it to Phil.
Thank you. And it's something that we've been talking about over the last little while with our union partners, and in particular the PSA. I think there are sort of two components to it that probably need to. At the moment, we've made an organisational decision not to provide additional funding or any sort of allowance for utilities. For one, it becomes quite hard to draw the line about what is in and what is out of such an allowance. The other part is that we recognise that whilst there may be an additional cost around things like heating, that is equally offset by potential savings to folk around transport and parking and such like. We are going to be working with the PSA over the next little while on just reviewing our approach to this and sort of coming up with an agreed position about how we move forward. So it is certainly on our collective radar screens.
Thank you. Is there anything you want to add to that, Phil? I think it's...
No, executive teams considered it for the short term. Obviously, we're watching the situation in terms of what the new normal looks like in terms of work patterns and so on, and we'll continue doing so.
Thank you very much. So it's been moved and seconded. It's been moved and seconded, so I'll put the recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 And to the contrary, no. Carried, and sorry if I cut Josephine Bartley out. She was about to ask a question. We